Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Mo Love Podcast, Honest Conversations with Mo. As promised, I said, I was gonna be more active and producing more content and driving out more episodes. So this is me honoring that kind of commitment to myself in that sense, and just want to go ahead and get started and get right into this episode for today and kind of start by opening up with kind of my themes for 2024 and how I kind of want to approach this year, and what that looks like for me. I kind of ended the last episode mentioning how, I kind of want to be assertive, what that really looks like for me and how does that look like and present for me in all aspects of my life, and, kind of been a central theme, as well as just understanding of the self, and I'll dive deeper into this episode that really delves into the self. As last episode I kind of spoke on self-awareness and self-confidence, and the difference between the two, and in this episode I just want to speak on what is self-loss, what does it look like when we lose ourselves, and how do we go about regaining ourselves, and that's kind of what I want to discuss within this episode, and what that really, I guess, what does it appear like for me when I feel like I've lost myself, and in what ways do I look to regain myself, or what coping mechanisms do I attach that feel like I'm regaining myself, but in actuality it's only continuing to hurt myself, and kind of what that looks like. So I guess I'll get right into it, and kind of what is self-loss, and what does self-loss look like. And for me, I guess self-loss is when I just, when I'm not honoring myself in all aspects of who I am and who I want to be, in that moment, whether that's, harping back, on past traumas, or looking too far ahead at expectations, and getting caught up in the idea of perfectionism, and how does it present itself. It's funny enough, yesterday I went to a journaling event, and the question was, several different prompts, but the prompt that stood out to me is, what am I not saying? And when I sat down and kind of started writing and thinking, I mean, at first it was tough to think about, like, what is it I'm not saying, and then I had to really look at, am I being my authentic self at all times? Am I honoring my whole entire self in all aspects, the mind and the body, and trusted myself, and presenting myself as authentically as I can be, and what does that authenticity look like? Often, we confuse authenticity as just, that trail of, being, I guess, genuine to a certain degree, but are we listening to, that inner voice, giving ourselves that inner consent, and really listening to ourselves and listening to our minds and our bodies, in every moment that we encounter in life, and then also within, I guess, to talk about self-loss is kind of the lack of wanting to take on responsibility, and we pass responsibility onto others because it's easier to allow others to kind of make decisions for us, instead of accepting and owning the choices that we make in our lives, and how we tend to approach it. Um, so kind of to go back to the journaling entry, and what I felt like I was not saying. I felt like, I was not saying or expressing, kind of my needs and wants, at all times. I spoke on how I'm observant, and it's easier to observe and to, diminish my voice instead of, you know, choosing to express my thoughts and my opinions, and regardless of potential ramifications. And I think the ramifications were more so internalized than externalized in terms of how others may have viewed, um, what I was going to say or what I felt I wanted to say. Um, so in that, I just, um, realized there was a lot I wasn't saying. Maybe, how I didn't give space to, be my authentic self by, relying on the opinions of others, and choosing to give, uh, that responsibility, or choosing to not take ownership of, myself. And that's kind of what I felt like, um, self loss kind of looked like for me, in which I wasn't wholeheartedly being my authentic self, in that regard. With authenticity, it can be very challenging in the sense of, you know, we live in a world where we're constantly, being observed, constantly being watched, even if we don't feel like we're being watched. And that fear can kind of eat at you. But but at the end of the day, we choose to, make the decisions and the choices for our lives, um, to eventually create the future that we want to see. Um, and it's definitely, a work in progress for myself as far as what that looks like, and, what that really entails as I continue to kind of, you know, be honest, and listening to myself and honoring the choices I make, good or bad, and the decisions that, I choose for myself. So it's always interesting when we think of, you know, self loss, as just, things that often tied to because of, our past traumas, as I mentioned, and we delve deep into it, and, keep scratching at that open wound and not allowing it to heal, and really not being transparent with ourselves in that regard, and that our wounds aren't, what define us, our traumas aren't what define us, and how do we continue to make the choices in the moment to continue to be the version of ourselves that we want to see, and what does that look like, um, and then how does it appear, how does it appear when you feel like you're losing yourself, and again, it can be tough because when we feel like we're losing ourselves, we honestly, for me, I wasn't even aware of it, that at times there was moments where I felt like, I lost myself. I really didn't feel like myself, um, and I had, really do an introspective dive, because I think sometimes, with the pressures of society, we, really don't have those internal dialogues with ourselves, and what that internal dialogue looks like, can be tough too in noticing that. Uh, for example, kind of for me, I think of, how I look at, my body kind of overall, and the way I spoke on my body, that kind of self talk, and being mindful of, that self talk and what that looks like and how that contributed to, a loss of self. Whether it be how others perceive this, as I mentioned, or how we choose to perceive ourselves, how we choose to utilize our bodies, utilize our minds, and uh, also, I guess, kind of how I mentioned, in regards to utilizing my voice. And that's kind of even a thing about to how or why I even created this podcast, was to kind of find, my voice and what that looks like for me. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, only I can determine, how I want to utilize my voice and how I want that to be uh, seen for myself, not seen by others, but really, for myself and what that looks like. And I think about um, really, when I don't use my voice or when I don't speak up in certain moments that I want to, I, of course, chose to make that decision. But what about what were the things I was not saying? How was I not, whether I was not advocating for myself or whether I wasn't being, the best representative of my authentic self. It's always interesting to think about and really analyze and capture. And as mentioned, this is going to be, continuous progress, and hopefully, continue to have these conversations, of course, with you all, and then, of course, with myself, off air as, I continue to grow as an individual, personally and professionally, and, all aspects of my life. And then how do I attribute that to being, my most authentic self, being this, being me, and how I choose, how I look to make the necessary choices in my life that allowed me to envision the future, as I mentioned, that I know where I want to be, and, who I want to be and what that looks like for me. Um, and really growing in, in that regards. And it's tough, man. I'm not gonna lie to you, it is definitely a challenge when we feel like we are being authentic, but we probably are not, because authenticity looks different for everyone. And how do you look to be the most authentic version of yourself is only defined by you and, the choices you make, as I mentioned. So it's always going to be a journey. It's always going to be a work in progress, especially in this, ever evolving world with, whether it's unnecessary expectations we place on ourselves or expectations placed on us by others. As a part of that journey, as we continue to evolve, physically and mentally, throughout our experiences, it's certainly, can be a challenge. And that's kind of, how I kind of wanted to open up, as I kind of shift into, of course, how I bring to you guys, I kind of, bring into the sports aspect, and how I kind of tie this into, kind of the NFL playoffs, where we notice even, certain teams, certain franchises not being kind of their authentic selves, especially, during these NFL playoffs. I think a lot of slander has been, placed, of course, on the Cowboys and kind of how the expectations that they create, year in and year out as a franchise, and how they always, succumb to the pressure of those expectations and always fall short, is always an interesting thing that I kind of look at, because a team that is as prominent as the Cowboys, of course, labeled America's team. I think as polarizing, only, few sports franchises are as polarizing as the Cowboys. Of course, my Los Angeles Lakers are just as polarizing, and of course, the New York Yankees, I think, are the three teams I can think of off the top of my head that are polarizing in the world of sports. And when you think about, the Cowboys, and what that kind of that self loss outside of course the obvious loss in the playoffs looked like for them, and how do they choose to move forward as a franchise to really get over that hump. I think the last 3 years they've uh, three straight 12-win seasons is nothing to laugh at, but how do they kind of get over that hump and uh, go beyond the expectations that they not only have created, placed on themselves as a franchise, but that society has kind of placed on them, and being America's team, and is often, laughed at as, kind of a joke in that sense of, oh, same old Cowboys, but how are they making the necessary choices to be a team that is consistently, you know, in not just playoff contention, but Super Bowl contention, and constantly chasing after Lombardies again, and what choices are they making that doesn't represent their authentic selves, in this moment, whether that's within roster construction, whether that's in uh, management, within the front office, and just kind of what that looks like for them, and then ooh, and it's funny enough, I saw earlier today with Jordan Love, where who it was the Cowboys who beat him, who beat the it was the Packers who beat the Cowboys the week prior, that obviously led to this kind of discourse. But seeing the Packers lose yesterday was interesting in the sense of where I think you see the opposite side of, I think authenticity and, kind of that being comfortable with oneself. I think I saw the comment earlier today from Jordan Love in terms of, when he threw the pick across his body to Greenlaw. And of course, it was a bad throw. He still had 53 seconds left in the fourth quarter to potentially, come back and tie the game and take it to overtime. And of course, they could look, or he could have easily not, took responsibility and diverted responsibility onto the kicker, who did, Anderson Carlson, who did miss a 41-yard field goal earlier in the game that would have tied it at 24-24. But seeing Jordan Love kind of take that ownership was admirable. And knowing, of course, cannot make those type of throws, across your body, in terms of where you could have easily thrown it away or, ran out of bounds, and, got a couple yards and, lived to play another down, and knowing, where he's looking to grow as, as a player, and looking where that room for improvement is available for him and for their team, and how they look to, get better. And then also regarding the NFL playoffs, in terms of looking at authenticity, man, that man, Lamar Jackson, man, Action Jackson, LJ, man, he's a superstar. And he's always been a superstar, of course. A little, saddened by the fact that, the Falcons, this past offseason decided not to, pick him up. And, that was again a choice that we made. We chose to rather, go for an established quarterback in Lamar Jackson. We chose to instead, analyze current quarterback that we had on our team, Desmond Riddler, and see his development and his progress throughout this season to see if he was going to be the long-term answer at quarterback. And of course, as we came to realize, he probably is not. And I don't want to immediately say he's not because, I mean, from what he's shown, he was not. But we'll see, next year. Of course, we're probably going to pick up a quarterback this offseason. But to get back to Lamar, just to know he had that trust in not only his abilities, to command, to know he deserved the amount of money that he, rightfully was owed, at the time being, uh, MVP, consistently taking the Ravens to the playoffs, being an all pro, being, a pro bowler, many times. So just knowing he had that trust in himself and his abilities, and the choice he made, of course, was the right choice because we see it now and how he's leading, the Ravens to their first AFC championship game since 2012, and I think that was the last time they won the Super Bowl. So just knowing what does authenticity look like from other aspects is always interesting as well. And as I said, I commend Lamar for always being his most authentic self, whether it was the comparisons or not the comparisons, often tell it, well, coming out of his scouting report was, he should change his position and he should be a wide receiver, or he runs too much, and he should be later on in his career, he runs too much and he should be a quarterback, or he's taking too many hits and not taking care of his body, and that's going to lead to the deterioration of his career. And of course, I think of course, not knowing Lamar Jackson as a person, but seeing how he chose to approach not only this past off season, but just this overall season, and making it a goal of being the best version of Lamar Jackson that we'll continue to see. And I feel like this, of course, won't be the last that we'll see of Lamar Jackson moving forward, throughout his NFL career, and how he, chooses to continue to be himself, continue to be the type of quarterback that he sees himself to be. I mean, the way he grew this season in terms of, being a pocket passer. I mean, yesterday and being, I think he threw for 154 yards. I think he also had 100 yards on the ground. 11 carries, 100 something yards on the ground. 2 touchdowns. 2 passing touchdowns. So yeah, 4 total touchdowns, and it took, and it was within all of his abilities, that we know he's capable of, in utilizing his best assets and being best version of himself. In terms of this year, how he transcended as a pocket passer, as I mentioned, it's been very amazing to watch and amazing to see how Lamar has grown in that aspect as a quarterback, and how he's grown just in terms of the criticism that was oftentimes very much unwarranted on Lamar, and choose to ignore and continue to make the necessary choices that was best for him. So I was, kind of think of those things in terms of what does, as I mentioned, what does authenticity look like? What does self-loss look like within ourselves, and kind of who we are as people, and what do we choose to do about it? Because it's easy to, placate responsibility and continue to, live within labels, or continue to not wanting to be, the best versions of ourselves. It's easy to do that. I think the hardest thing is to be our most authentic selves, is having those honest conversations to shed whether it's the beliefs, the ideals, the habits that we choose to, that we know don't uh, allow us for us to be our best selves, but continue to, reconstruct ourselves and really grow in that regard. And, I feel like, this is just, going to be kind of a time where for myself, as I continue to, um, hmm, as I continue to just, be, as I said, just be who I want to be wholeheartedly, and, what the self looks like for me and, um, in every moment, as I mentioned. So just, uh, looking to just, be in the moment and not necessarily saying expectations are bad or, you know, but also understanding certain things that I think we often forget also too about, like we talk about toxicity, but toxic positivity, and what that looks like, if that's honoring the best versions of ourselves, if we're just being kind of content with certain aspects of ourselves. And I think that's important too. And before I kind of head into, of course, kind of wrap it up with, kind of the top four, I kind of want to close it with this, in terms of with self loss, is we're gonna constantly be reconstructing ourselves, fine tuning and finding new ways to engage with the world. And I think it's important just continue to make the choices that best represent you and best represent who you are, and not allowing society's expectations, how society perceives us, and giving in to those expectations or into those notions of about ourselves or about the world around us. And as I said, placating responsibility, like self ownership, and kind of what that looks like moving forward. So as I mentioned, as I continue to keep you guys afloat on kind of this journey as we go on life, just what does losing yourself look like for you? And I kind of want to open up that question. And how do you look to find yourself again, and how do you look to regain yourself and be the best version of you for you? And that's all that matters, at the end of the day. And heading into the top four, I've been listening to this playlist I've created again. You guys probably have come to know how much I love creating kind of playlists. So this one was, I titled it "One Touch Feeling Like 1 Million," and I think the song, let me find it, I think it was centered around, I think it was Burna Boy's song from his "I Told Them" album, Tested, Approved, and Trusted. Definitely loving that song. So I've been listening to that playlist. As far as the different other songs that are on that playlist, Trap Smarter by Safe, I-95 by Remy, Tuesdays is Dead by Cat Stevens, Alone Too Long by Hall and Oates. That's been consistently in rotation. Of course, I Told Them by Burna Boy. What is it? What I Know Now, Everything by Cedric, Brazil, and Legend, featuring Moray by Busta Rhymes. And I like that Busta Rhymes album as well. So that's kind of what I've been listening to of late. And that playlist has been, in heavy rotation for me. As I said, I do my best to create a playlist every month and kind of stick to it. Of course, I'll listen to, other music that's kind of circulating around in that, in the present moment as well. As far as what I've currently been watching and really been enjoying watching, still been on that Gil Arena. That that Uncle Ocho nightcap hilarity. Um, what else have I been watching as far as TV shows? Night Agent was a real good show. I really enjoyed. Was recommended. Reacher. Ooh, Reacher's a good one. Although season two, I will say, season two wasn't as promising as season one. Season one had you on the edge of your seat, and I really loved season one of Reacher. But overall, I did like season two. It's gonna be interesting how they continue to progress the story with Reacher. Now that I guess I won't do spoilers. But as far as how the character continues to grow, and I didn't know it was based. Well, obviously now knowing it was based off of the books, but initially didn't know it was uh based off the book. So I'll maybe not maybe look into checking out the books and seeing kind of thing of that aspect and seeing how the story can potentially unfold. And I do like shows that kind of base their creations off a book or off a character in a novel. Is always interesting. Um, what do I currently have going on? Just I'll say I've been going kind of out more to kind of more events, being more social, and really what that looks like for me. And engaging more, with the world. I'm very much, to myself oftentimes. So I think really challenging myself to, kind of go out more to, different events. As I mentioned, this was my second time going to this journaling event, which was fun and it's been giving me, space to really express myself. And uh, someone had mentioned it to me as far as, I'm the type of person that I like to go to things. It's hard to like really gain an understanding if I'm not able to, interact with it and engage with it. Whether it's, how I've been, consistent in, going to yoga or, as I said, going to these journaling events or going just to different events around the city. I think how do I utilize that within all aspects of my life in terms of, being present more for the things I enjoy and really engaging with it and finding the necessary spaces that allow me to, be my most authentic self. So really, continue to do more and be more. And then oh, let me go back to a show I've been watching also, House of Lies. Oh my gosh, Don Cheadle in any financial role, financial mogul. This show, he's of course a financial consultant. He was star in Black Mondays. I also loved way back when. But yeah, House of Lies is of course an old show, but just really from Showtime. So really getting into that show has been dope, uh, and it's kind of been funny as far as kind of analyzing the show and seeing how the different characters, deal with deal with not being their most authentic selves. And their different coping mechanisms and how I've kind of gathered that within the show. It's been interesting too. But yeah, it's been a great watch. I'm on season three of House of Lies, so I gotta finish up that show. It's been, a real good watch. And then lastly, what am I looking forward to? Um, just continue this journey of making the necessary choices that allow me to be the best version of myself and honoring those decisions, and continue to grow, man. I always say, I think life is of course an adventure, and how we choose to engage with it is all based on what we choose to do, of course our choices. So yeah, what just of course, as I mentioned, the exciting trips that I kind of have on deck for this year that I look to embark on as well, and the experiences I continue to engage, and the people I will meet, and the connections I'll build. So just looking to grow in all areas, and yeah, really excited as 2024 is just beginning, and excited, yeah, for 2024 overall. Of course, Kobe years is, you see the 24 behind me, um yeah, I'm excited for 2024, and continue to do necessary things to be the best version of myself. So as I said, I always appreciate you guys listening, and sticking with me for another episode of Honest Conversations with Mo, uh the Mo Love podcast. So appreciate you guys as always. Have a blessed one. Enjoy. I think we have enjoy the rest of the NFL playoffs. Hopefully, my Lakers can turn it around. I know they didn't talk on them too much. Been a bit frustrated in terms of what they've been doing, in terms of not being our authentic selves, and how we choose, or finding the identity of who we are as a team. I think we still haven't figured that out. Potentially the moves we'll look to make. And yeah, I'll probably deep dive into the Lakers next episode. But yeah, as always, appreciate you guys for listening in, and have a great one, and be blessed. Peace.